Hello, my pregnant and strong team. Welcome to episode 4 of Pregnant and Strong. Today I had I've got an incredible chat for you with Pete Walrath. He is the founder of a charity called Mummy Star. This chat is, very personal, but also kind of talking about the cancer space and mix this with pregnancy. So we dive into a lot of topics. So it comes with a trigger warning around cancer diagnosis within pregnancy. But the way Pete talks about this is so uplifting, so positive, and he really shares all the incredible work that he's doing within this space. So I know that you guys are going to find it super interesting, inspiring, motivational. But if it doesn't feel like the right time to listen to this for whatever reason, please come back to it when it might feel like a better time, or you can skip this one. But I really hope you enjoy this chat. We touched on so many different things. Obviously, we talk about the work of Mummy Star, Pete's charity that he founded in 2013 after his wife very sadly passed away of cancer 10 weeks after their son was born, second son. He's an amazing example of kind of strength and courage and building something really groundbreaking and incredible from, a place of tragedy. We also talk about fitness in pregnancy. Obviously, we talk about mental and physical strength in pregnancy, experiences of that, the healthcare sector, and how we're both on this mission to change the narrative around support for women during that antenatal care. We then talk a little bit about menopause. It's all in there, guys. I absolutely loved this chat with Pete, and I hope you do too. So enjoy the conversation. Welcome, pregnant and strong team, to another episode. Thanks for joining. Today we have the amazing Pete, who definitely knew about this, so we're all good to go. And I'm just going to give Pete a little intro, and then I want him to tell you all about his background, because it's a super interesting story, and I'm really excited for you to hear about all the work that Pete does. So we actually were introduced by a friend of mine that I know through the gym, and we have sort of started working together a little bit on a research project. Pete set up an incredible charity called Mummy Star. Was it in 2011 or 2012?
2012 it's kind of stemmed from, and it was like formally launched 2013. So 2013. Nearly 13 years we've been going now.
A long time.
Yeah.
And Pete's done a lot of work, and I'm going to let him explain all about this, about supporting women and families who have a cancer diagnosis in pregnancy. And I think one of the things that really struck me, and one of the reasons I wanted to get Pete on the podcast, is you kind of hear this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, because I'm sure you have this conversation all the time, and you think, oh, that never happens. That doesn't happen. And actually all the conversations we've had and the research that we're now, leading into, it actually happens more than you think, for many reasons, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. And it was really kind of under research, but also maybe like just people didn't have the knowledge about that.
I think underrepresented as well.
Yeah, underrepresented
as an area, definitely.
Yeah. And I just wanted to highlight this because I think it's important, but Pete also recently was awarded an MBE. Had to get that in there as well. So that's my very brief intro. And I haven't told you much about Pete's background, because I'd like you, if possible, to just tell everyone listening, like, how you got to this point, a little bit about your story, and a little bit about the work of Mummy Star. I think that's a good place to start.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me on anyway. And reminding me that we were due to be on this morning because my diary malfunctions. So my name's Pete. I'm the founder and CEO of a charity called Mummy Star, which, if you're saying, has been going now nearly 13 years. And we're quite a unique charity in the wider cancer sector, as well serviced as it is. We support families who are diagnosed with any form of cancer at any stage during pregnancy, or any time up to 12 months postnatally. And we set up in 2013, 6 months after I lost my wife and and she had been diagnosed with cancer the year before in mid-2012 when we were midway through our second pregnancy, and she received a breast cancer diagnosis. And at the time, it was one of those things that you just don't really know even is possible. And so you get so taken aback by, wow, okay, this only gives you a bit of guidance, still real book as to what cancer and pregnancy means. So loads of unknowns. What can you do? What can't you do? So we as a family went through all this turmoil. And sadly for us, Maya's cancer, had quite a devastating impact. Not immediately when she was diagnosed, it was more sort of post-lately, the cancer very quiet. It actually spread to the lining of her brain. She passed away when our little boy Murray was 10 weeks old. But I think the seed from Mummy Star was really planted, I think, once we were diagnosed itself, and actually that sort of as well serviced and as well supported as we were by those cancer charities that did exist, there was still this gap that actually, how are you supposed to navigate this? How are you, from the logistical side, from the emotional side, which, we'll no doubt get onto, how are you supposed to cope as a family? And we were, I suppose ours was from a point of reflection that we were quite fortunate. It sometimes sounds a little bit of a strange word to use, when you're talking about having lost someone to from a cancer diagnosis, but we were very fortunate in the sense that we actually had a really good support structure around us. We had, parents that were quite close by, we had family and siblings that were quite close by, had a really wonderful community around us that really wrapped us up and supported us and kind of carried us along the way. So it was more a reflection of, well, what would a family do if they hadn't had that? How would others actually cope? And, financially, we were relatively secure in terms of our jobs, and our employers really supported as well. And so Mummy Star stemmed from a conversation, amongst us as family, but also a couple of women, and one woman in particular, Nicolette Peel, who sadly lost a couple of years ago, who had met Maya and had given her that real validation of actually, do you know what, juggling a cancer diagnosis in and around pregnancy or with a newborn, it's okay to not feel all the joys that I suppose society dictates that we should feel from our postnatal. And I think when I saw Maya's face the day she came back from that meeting, it was like, really, wow. So that's the first time I've seen her look less pressure on her shoulders, holding her head up a little bit higher. No, it's okay to not feel all of this and be able to really enjoy it all. And so when sadly declined, and after her death, I think I still had it in my head about, we've got to do something to try and cut this gap. There's going to be other families out there that feel like this, struggle like us, that emotionally are really, feel like they're drowning at times. We set about getting the charity going in mid-2013, and we've grown ever since. And we provide support in a really personalized way. So it's very much kind of one-to-one, very much about you as an individual family, what your structure looks like, what your family support system is, what the children that you've got in the family, your birth history, is really important, and making sure that everyone doesn't get conflated by the cancer diagnosis. And actually, what came prior to cancer? What led you to this point, that you're in now? And so we provide support in a number of different ways. It's the emotional support, so having that one-to-one contact with families. And then we also provide a lot of some financial support to families of non-beat assistance support, just to pick up some of the financial strain that families experience. But one of the things that I spent most of my day doing is actually delivering our teaching and education, which is something that has really, has rolled over the years.
When you first started Mummy Star, it's really interesting because not exactly the same journey, but I've been on a similar journey with helping a charity develop from a personal circumstance that we lost this is nothing to do with being pregnant, but it's just, about growing a charity from something like this, that we lost my best friend Nat very suddenly when we were both 26 of a brain aneurysm, and we started a trust, the Natalie Kate Moss Trust, after she died. And very similarly to how you were saying that Mummy Star's kind of developed over time, we started supporting people one-to-one, and then it's kind of grown into this kind of bigger mission of, okay, we can support people one-to-one, but how are we going to change things on a bigger scale, which I know that's what you've been working on. Did you have, when you started out, did you have like a sole mission for Mummy Star? Like, this is what I want to change? Or did it develop over time?
It has evolved. It's definitely. I think the original aim was simply to make sure that no other family who gets diagnosed in a situation feels as isolated and alone as we did. And that was through the simplicity of connection. It was going to be about being able to sort of, you could virtually meet other families that were going through it, but also you could speak to people who had an insight, and I'm cautious in my words here, an insight into what it's like to be diagnosed. And I talk about this in education sessions a lot, is that we need to be better at drawing it, and we need to be less loose-lipped with using the word understanding, because actually we can't. I can understand. I can talk to another dad or another partner who is supporting their loved one go through a cancer diagnosis, and I can understand what they're going through because I've done that myself. I can't understand what it's like to get a cancer diagnosis because unfortunately I've never been diagnosed. And I think it's a word that we throw around a little bit. So I understand what it must be like for you because my uncle got diagnosed. It's like, well, you don't understand. But you can empathize with what that brings to a family and its holistic impact. And cancer does, we talk about it sometimes in like concentric circle of impact. It's the person diagnosed, and then it's the part of the children, the wider family, the community impact. And I think that goes for, and I suppose what we miss within that is, where is your identity beyond being a parent? You're not just, mum and dad or partner or wife and, wife and husband. You are person who has a job, and you have your likes and hobbies, and you've got more things that, what are your outlets? What keeps you going during the day through the humdrum of, yes, parenting is joyful, but also it's tiring and it can be very stressful. And, where do we reach out and get our identity within that? So I think within those conversations, very often it actually ceases to be about cancer and it becomes more about, let's talk about what we're doing outside of this. Why do certain family members drive us up the wall at times in the nicest way possible? But these are things that are just normal, and we do it on a day-to-day basis. So why can't we just continue those conversations even when we have cancer diagnosis? So a lot of it was, I think, wanting to just normalize things and actually make sure and say, do you know what? I am not my diagnosis. I am B. And actually, that's also going on. So it was a shift in the dial a little bit around identity. But what it's evolved into is, I think, like you just touched upon, if you'd asked me 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I never would have said, I can imagine myself standing in front of 150 students and delivering a session on cancer pregnancy. It was never the go-to. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've always been a talker, but in a very, very different context. Like I used to work in youth clubs, and I used to work in social housing, doing community projects. So I'm used to doing public-facing kind of stuff, but not in an education type role or a training type role. So that's been a real surprising privilege to have been able to step into. And it's, I love, delivering that work.
And I think often our conversations have stemmed around this kind of gap between healthcare and in my case, in some of the conversations we've been having around the gap between healthcare and fitness, but I think also from your work, it was just really resonating with me when you were talking then that when you were saying about identity, I'm sure lots of women listening to this who are pregnant will be like, I kind of feel like when I got pregnant, my identity was like, oh, now you're pregnant. And then you become a parent. And it's like, oh, you're like, in my case, you're Sol's mum. No, I'm still Iona. I'm still Iona. So there's this whole shift in identity to then layer on top of that, having a cancer diagnosis in what is already a really kind of challenging time anyway. That connection that Mummy Star can provide, I'm sure is amazing for those women, because I think, like you said, it's an isolating time anyway for women. You feel like you're going through this crazy experience by yourself, to then have something else layered on top of you that is, as you put it, like not normal. It just adds another layer of, so having that support network and connection is so important, isn't it? At that time.
Cancer on its own is isolating for everybody whoever gets a diagnosis. And you often hear in kind of cancer circles, the cancer community is the one thing that I never want to be a part of. But once you are part of it, it's something that you really struggle to not be within. And obviously, so you then become consumed with, potentially by, everybody I know is not cancer. So therefore, inevitably, I am going to lose some of the people I now know. But I think what gets lost within this is, going back to what we're saying, is I am pregnant. We are pregnant as a couple. We are about to be parents. We are also cancer in the eyes of medical professionals a lot of the time. It's actually, you know what? No, in our eyes, we were still admired. We were pregnant for the second time. Well, in our third pregnancy, it had suffered a miscarriage about 4 years before our first baby was born. And so that was us. And Maya was still the project manager in the policy unit in the local authority that she was working. She wasn't suddenly, oh, that lady's got breast cancer. She also has cancer. And I know it sounds like there's small details, or it's just about semantics of language, but it actually matters to people.
I think it really does.
I remember it. I think in the months following Maya's death, I think I had kind of, ever since Merlin was born, I'd got quite used to just, being the main sort of doer in the house. I mean, I was always an active. We were never one of those families where it's like, well, mainly the person who's brought children is the person who does everything. We were very kind of, we all do everything in the house, and so there was nothing unusual about being an active parent after when Maya was giving birth to Merlin. But obviously, there was this sadness that crept in about not being able to go for that little walk after the nursery run because she just wasn't physically able to, because she was too tired, or so the routine, the feeding, the changing, the getting dinners ready, the getting into bed, all that sort of stuff, it just became kind of a bit more orthodox back. After her death, that obviously continued, but no, there was a sense of, it was always a hold up prior. It was like, when she's better, the two of us will be able to enjoy all these things. Whereas obviously once she sadly died, there was a permanent sort of, right, this is me, I'm a single parent now, this is me, Merlin, this is us forevermore. I got to about 4 months and I could feel my project head start to take over again. I was like, how long should I stay off in a reasonable sense, which is actually good for the kids and good for me, because they want social interaction and they were getting some stuff. But actually, you know what? They might enjoy being in the nursery. They might enjoy being in the childminders. And actually, I've got a project head. I is only creative in terms of the work that I was doing at the time. So it's like, you know what? If I go back to work part-time, it's going to benefit me, it's going to benefit the kid. And it's that. And again, I can only try and imagine what that must be like for somebody that has been off on maternity leave, and thinking there's a point where you might feel like you're just seen as a parent, or you're just seen as support. People joke about it sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm just a milk factory. I just sit here all day and all they do is feed. And actually, I just want somebody to just see me as something other than that. And that's, that's kind of anecdotal, almost paraphrasing from friends that I've, had over the years, where they've been like, you know what, everybody thinks this is wonderfully brilliant. It's just so tiring. I just want to be me again. I just want to go for that run. I just want to, go and, go to the gym, or go and just do something that's just, I want to go for a walk. It's just me around the park, not do 6 circuits of it until the baby falls through. Which we've all done.
We've all done. Yeah, definitely. I think that just notion of support and identity is so important. And how did the work with midwives and education and training evolve? Because this part really interests me in terms of, how did it stem from? How did you see a gap? Did you, obviously you had lived experience of this.
This all started very much from, so Nicolette, who Maya and I had met, I mentioned very well. So Nicolette, after her own diagnosis, had actually retrained as a midwife.
Right.
So as she was going through her study, she was at one of the Royal College of Midwifery, the national conference, one year. And there was a section inviting the trailblazers. I think it might get slightly wrong. So she stood up and basically put forward this idea of that there needs to be oncology-trained midwives or midwives that would caseload families with cancer diagnosis. And this idea, I think, really blew people's heads a little bit sideways. They were like, but even in the RCM, we're the all-governing midwifery, body. But cancer and pregnancy isn't even on our radar necessarily, and therefore it will not be to our members, but also our future members of the student council within the RCM. And that caught the attention of a lot of senior members of the RCM. And so Nicolette got invited in to do some ad hoc talks to universities, like where she could study in Salford. There was a couple of universities in London. And then it just started to spiral. We started to get more invites, and sometimes me and Nicolette would all up. We'd go do a joint presentation. Sometimes I would then go do the, and then student midwife society started to get hold of us because they were meeting us at conferences that we would start to, be present at. We'd have a stall, and they would say, "Look, this is on our curriculum. We don't get. There's always like a complexities in pregnancy module, but it's very much touching on loads of different complexities. It could be diabetes. It could be somebody with a history of. It could be somebody with epilepsy. It could be, what happens if somebody gets cancer. But it never went into much depth about how do you maintain birth choices? How do you make sure the person and their
the nuances and details.
Yeah, how do you make sure that remains part of the cancer care plan rather than just becoming shoved to the side and say, right, oncology care first, midwifery, maternity care comes afterwards, and that gets shoehorned in
and not being joined up in that respect. Yeah.
So that kind of grew. Initially, it was a lot of midwifery societies reaching out to us ad hoc. We used our goal, we'd arrange to do some face-to-face. And then COVID happened. And so you'd had a few relationships build up, and then people changed, staff changed, people retired, people went back on the front line. We lost our contacts. But we developed a lot of new ones for the virtual setting as that started to evolve during COVID. It was like, there's loads of universities because people are getting so used to having to do all this. They're starting to find gaps in the curriculum, but they can invite somebody else in. And so we started getting invites, and it was like, happy to do a session. So I started to develop a template about, the main things that we could sort of develop to deliver to people. And I was bantering off some midwifery colleagues to say, look, where is the extra detail that you'd like to have the gaps filled in terms of your knowledge? And before we knew it, by the time we came out of COVID, we'd suddenly jumped from maybe 10 sessions a year to delivering over 30 sessions a year to loads of different universities around the country. And what came with that was that healthcare professionals themselves were then getting wind of this. And they were then getting in touch with us saying, why could you come and do something online to our maternity team at X hospital or at this trust or at that trust? And it just grew and grew and grew. So once we knew we had a foothold, and then we had the word of mouth start to spread, we then started reaching out actively to those universities that we didn't already have a relationship with to try and basically cover off. The aim is to get every university that delivers midwifery in the country to have us sit on the curriculum each year for ideally second years or third years. We don't do it for first years because I think there's too much going on in the first year of a midwifery course that they actually, in terms of basics of midwifery, ours is better getting sort of, dropped in second and third year. And it's just evolved fantastically, where, we're probably delivering 2, maybe 3 sessions a week sometimes. Some of it online, some of it face-to-face, probably an even split between the two. So I've just, this week I've been delivering sessions down at Middlesex the other day, which is the first doing that face-to-face. I did a couple of sessions to cover their year group. But it's a real privilege to be able to do it because I don't come from a clinical background at all. And so to be trusted and to be thought of as, experts in our field, I think that's never lost on me. The fact that we are invited into a space where actually there's some really essential, precious work that has to be taught. And yet we are seen with such a value in terms of what we're talking about that actually people say, you know what, you are well worth 2 or 3 hours of our students' time, or even a half day if it allows us to be able to come in and talk to them about this a bit more, and to share my story and all the good experience that we had around our actual cancer care as well.
But I think it's what you're saying is so important, and this is kind of a huge driver for me. Different, similar context, but is this there's a lot of kind of reactive, band-aid approaches to solving issues or challenges, I think, in this country. And what I think is amazing about the work that you do is you're going to go in and speak to these student midwives, and there is a chance. I mean, maybe you can talk in a second just about the statistics, because I think that's really interesting, for people to realize. But there is a high chance that a lot of these midwives are going to come across someone, who's had a cancer diagnosis or who's been affected by this. And I kind of think even someone who's going through another challenge, what you set out to them is how to treat people, not with 2 separate entities. That really struck me that this whole detached, you're pregnant and this is your midwifery care and you've got a cancer diagnosis. So I can imagine lots of women that are pregnant with a cancer diagnosis immediately think, this is an assumption, oh, I can't have a natural birth, or, oh, my birth, like something's going to have to change about my birth. Whereas actually we've talked about this, like obviously it depends on your personal circumstances, but not always is that going to be affected. But that's what would immediately come to a woman's mind. Oh my goodness, all these other choices I'm going to have to make.
And in the eyes of the health professionals as well. If you're untrained in this, if you've ever come across it, your assumption at times than not is going to be, oh, right, this is going to place
things are going to change.
Places.
Exactly.
And I think you just touched upon it there within your question. I think it is the fact that it actually cross-cuts, and you can apply that, we always explain this in sessions. It's like, take what we've talked about today and apply it to somebody being diagnosed with any other form of chronic illness or pregnancy. It's essentially the same messages. Don't define them by their illness, like we're talking about. It sounds like we're repeating that, but I think it's important to reiterate it.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think it's that thing of let's break down the mystique within this. It's actually, when you talk about, there is far more choice around treatments, around the gestational age, treatments, around the types of surgery you can have, around the types of birth that you can have. There's more about feeding choices than you would otherwise think. But I think because the episode, you don't really see the stories shared that much through the media.
Yeah, 100%.
And the stories that we are used to hearing about cancer are very much about, what chemotherapy did to me, what my surgery did to me, and I saw my auntie or go through this, or it might be a celebrity story. It might be something like, you might have seen, something like Sarah Arby's, decline and death a few years ago. And as soon as you hear cancer, when you're of that age range, whether you're pregnant or not, you immediately jump to the worst. You think, oh my God, this. And actually, there's loads of factors that contribute sadly to somebody's death, like ours. Some of it is, sometimes it might be symptoms that were missed, not picked up early enough. Sometimes, like Ollie's story, it's just a tragically rapid decline where there was no outward sign of symptom that she was going downhill, because she was actually responding really well to her breast cancer treatment. It was reducing. It had just silently spread, and there's nothing anybody could have done about that. But I think in the age of social media that we are so flooded with stories about cancer, what it does, what should have been done, what should have, could have, would have been done. And also, there's a lot of health misinformation out there as well, around, things that you can and cannot try, what works, what doesn't work.
100%. I think that's the same.
That's an entire series of podcasts on its own.
I think that's the whole thing, that a lot of the conversations we've had, where we've talked about exercise in pregnancy, which is what a lot of this podcast is about, and having that layer on top is this idea that when you're pregnant, and I'm obviously just getting totally targeted with all this. I work in pregnancy related stuff, and I am pregnant, so my Instagram feed and everything, the algorithm is just sending everything. But it so often the underlying narrative is no restriction, what you can't do. So when we've talked, and part of the research project we're going to be doing is researching the difference in advice that women in pregnancy without a cancer diagnosis and women in pregnancy with a diagnosis are getting around physical activity. And I can only imagine, and again, this is an assumption, but if you're already advised as a pregnant person to, slow down, take it easy, don't do this, don't do that, then you layer a cancer diagnosis on top of that. Everyone working with you, like you say, the healthcare professionals, if they haven't experienced this or they're not trained, are going to be like, obviously don't do CrossFit. Are you crazy?
Don't move.
Don't be running. Don't be, when actually we've had so many conversations, and we'll come on to this because I want to ask you about, kind of other tools and strategies. But actually, lots of times when people are going through illnesses, whether it's cancer or another serious illness, things like exercise are a huge benefit to them.
Yeah. And it's changed, that the landscape has changed markedly since I got involved with this in terms of Mummy Stars formation. But just to jump back briefly, because you were asking me before about figures. What's really interesting about the education aspect is that actually we're seeing that translate to practice now, that when we get women referred now, we always ask the question of any health professional or any person, how did you find out about us? And we get more and more people filling out, when you came to our university, did session 4 years ago.
That's great. So you're seeing
we see that translation in a loose sense. But in terms of statistical the incidence rate, it's roughly 1 in every 1,000 pregnancies that will see a cancer diagnosis. So when you look at the birth rate in the UK, I know it's obviously dropped in the last few years, because we didn't see that perceived boom after COVID, obviously, because everybody was driving each other mad, being stuck in the house rather than get out their clothes. But even then, the statistic rate, that equates to about 2 women a day being diagnosed with a form of cancer. Now, some of those, obviously, it's going to be much more common, like breast cancer is by far and away the most common cancer we see, gynae cancers, blood cancers, melanoma. 2 women a day suddenly doesn't sound that rare. And actually, the likelihood that if you see somebody, so we have to reiterate this to existing health professionals and students all the time is to say, like, guys, it's not a case of if you ever see somebody in this situation, it's when, and it's about being prepared and just trying to boost your confidence, sort of when you see somebody. I think going back to the fitness question, when I first kind of, I suppose, got into this cancer, the world of cancer, I think because of my diagnosis, the advice around her, aside of her pregnancy, the advice and guidance around the cancer diagnosis was, once you've had chemotherapy, make sure you go home and you rest, and you recuperate, and this, that, and the other. And it was very much on being static, being very, very, sedentary in your approach to recovery. All of us meet extremes in life, and I think my first inkling into this was a friend of mine who, bizarrely, we reconnected through cancer, because even though we'd actually been to school together and we'd lost touch, so we hadn't spoken to each other for about 20 years. And then I saw him featured on the TV one evening, going after reports, and he was running a marathon a month for 6 months, spotlight going through ongoing chemotherapy, as he was living with terminal bowel cancer. He's thinking, I was that important. And so we met up and everything, and he was talking. He said, no, for me, running is helping me offset the worst side effects of my cancer. Because if I sit still, I feel awful. I have no energy. I have lethargic. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to take this to the benchmark of this is what everybody should advise. Because obviously everybody reacts differently to different types of chemotherapy, different sets of treatments, etc., etc. But it was that vision of, okay, well, if it's the extreme on one end, and we've got the sedentary response to chemotherapy on the other end, there's millions of people in the middle. Ben is not going to be your standard person who's going to go, right, guys, come on, chemotherapy in 3-week cycles, a marathon each week at least, nothing less. It's like, no, that's not going to work. But armchair exercises, running on a casual basis, loose basis, just being physically in the gym, just doing something, and it could be anything. It's totally changed in the last decade. Now, there is so much out there in terms of cancer around remaining active in cancer. There's more. I don't know about, I can't cite specific research, but I know there is research out and it shows actually staying active is helpful in terms of your psychological and your physical response to cancer treatment. You have more and more cancer treatment retreats now. People are out there walking. I think the late Joe Taylor, who sadly passed away before Christmas, who had an organisation called ABC Diagnosis, she set up like a yearly retreat for people who are all going through cancer, some secondary cancer, some, still in a curative situation. But it was all about, out active, Nordic walking weekends, yoga retreats, all the rest of it. Yeah,
there's that relationship between recovery and it's physical activity.
It's the shift, whatever works for you, whatever your activity is. It's just about do what feels right for you. And do you know what? You mentioned it before. Do you know what? Some forms of CrossFit that probably aren't exactly going to be conducive to having just had chemotherapy. But it doesn't mean you can't do that form of exercise at a milder, less exertion than you normally would do it. But it's still you in your space. And more importantly, sometimes it's in your social space.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's the thing that people often lose within a cancer diagnosis, is that social interaction. People presume, oh, you're not well enough, so you know what, we won't invite you out this week because you've just had chemo, haven't you? And it's more, no, listen to the person, take the lead, invite them, and let them say no if they're not feeling well. Don't presume they're not well enough to do so.
Yeah, it's that assumption before you've actually looked at the personal case, isn't it?
Yeah. Think, God, you know what, they won't be well enough. It's like, no, ask. Always ask.
And I guess this relates to what we've just been talking about. And I'm sure you've seen thousands of examples of this, and we've definitely talked about it. But this podcast is called Pregnant and Strong. What examples of strength have you seen from the families that you've worked with, and what do you think's helped them with that? Because you've obviously worked with lots and lots of different people.
Yeah. I think being seen, I think, is something that we underestimate what feeling validated means, and actually being seen, spoken to as the person, as an individual, like you talked about, not defining your conversation by somebody's illness, and actually seeing them and just think, you know what, talk to me as you would any other person, as a friend, as a family member, and if the conversation switches to cancer, so be it. But actually, that's not me. Allowing that person a freedom to be their version of themselves. And what I mean by that is, one of the phrases that used to really, and it still to this day bugs me whenever I hear it, is I remember I had been told at our point of diagnosis, that like post-treatment, this is when everything was, still positive, we were all looking at a cure situation. It's like, post-cancer, things will change. You'll get used to a new version of normal. And it always stuck with me, this. I thought, how constraining a phrase is that to somebody? I said, my normal be how I allow it to be, not that you tell me that it will be different and I won't be able to. Does that mean I'm not going to be able to do the things that I once did? Does that mean I'm not going to be able to lift what I used to be able to lift? Does that mean I'm not going to be able to move the way I used to be able to move psychologically?
It's also a very cryptic message to give to someone going through something unsettling,
And I think it's more about forewarning people that, you know what, you might feel some changes in, there might be days that you feel heavier than others in terms of your mental load. There might be days where you feel physically restricted. Your mobility doesn't feel what it once was. But it's about, right, so how do we walk around that?
Yeah.
If you find this thing a struggle now, what can we do instead to offer something else to be able to do the active? And I have seen families go through from the point where they almost hold on to their pregnancy. And they said, you know what, if it wasn't for this pregnancy, I'm in there for a family cancer diagnosis. It's actually maybe just the additional hormone activity in the body has maybe made that look more common. It hasn't caused this, and it's important that we need to clarify this. Pregnancy does not cause cancer, and there is no reason to suggest it ever does. However, I think it's important to recognise that for hormone-receptive cancers, a higher hormonal activity level in the body through pregnancy could well make a lump or a cancer more prominent. But in the eyes of many families, that therefore makes it discoverable. And had they not been pregnant, that cancer may have laid dormant in their body for many years. And by the time it was diagnosed, they could have been dealing with a very different situation. They may not have been cured of anything. So people have these silver linings where they really take pregnancy as, this is my reason to go, this is my reason to continue, this is my reason to push through. Those days where you feel just totally bedraggled as a result of chemotherapy and utterly drained, that crippling fear of anybody who hears the word cancer, they will inevitably fear for their own life, even when they're told. But the good news is you're curative.
Yeah.
Everybody's mind goes to some form of catastrophic thinking. And I don't always think that's a bad thing. I think sometimes we need to allow ourselves to go to that worst end in order to be able to come back to a point of actually more pragmatic, kind of framing of the situation. But I think people who do that are always absolutely just aghast, but they're able to take that moment and actually see it as positive, as going, everyone needs the reason to keep going. This is it. I'm going to, get to a point where, baby arrives or I have baby to fight for. There's a flip side of that, which is sadly those families where they're sadly not able to continue their pregnancies, and the resolute strength that you see in those individuals. Some of whom I have the pleasure of working with now. I've gone on to, do things for other people within the cancer setting to be able to help support their recovery despite their own grief, their ongoing grief and their losses and the impact the cancer has had on them. I think I'm always, and it's a bit weird really me saying this because I do it myself, I think I'm always really staggered and amazed at the number of people who are impacted by cancer and then subsequent and all that it impacts it can take from them. And yet they then remain within the cancer space to go on and support other people. Either they end up working in the cancer space or they develop something within the cancer space to support where that didn't exist already. And you think, do you not want to just turn your back on this and just leave it behind? But then I didn't do that. I threw myself headfirst into it. And I think whether other people look at it the way I do, which is sometimes the closer you keep cancer to you, the more you can keep an eye on it and you're aware of its impact on you. Whereas if you try and disappear from it as much as possible, if you ever hear a friend or a family member that you get diagnosed, the risk is it's going to break everything back very, very quickly for you. in terms of, and prevent that kind of stepping forward. You can't put it behind you, but you can step forward. And then I think it's the post cancer, or even living, it's people that are living with cancer on an ongoing basis. Some of the things that they go on to do, whether it's physical challenges, whether it's that support they offer people, whether it's a change of lifestyle, I love the beauty of how individual it is, and that even though you can line up 10 women who have all had the same type of breast cancer diagnosed at the same gestation with the same birth history, and all of them will end up going off on very, very different journeys and different levels of recovery and different things they expose themselves to, and positive and negative responses to their own situation, and very different outcomes long term from the cancer diagnosis as well. But it's the privilege of being within that space with them at the time. I think it's privilege is the best word I can use to describe it. For me and for the team, in terms of how we're supporting people through that.
And I think what you touched on it there about kind of symptoms and having a diagnosis when you might not have picked it up. I've really been thinking about this a lot in coming into this podcast, and also just generally, is that when you're already going through this, I think particularly first pregnancy, second pregnancy feels a little bit different for me personally, just because you at least know there's a similar journey that you're going on. It might not be exactly the same, but you've seen your body do this kind of thing before. Mm-hmm. But that first pregnancy, I can't imagine, how often are symptoms missed, and how hard is it to see? Not that I want to worry anyone listening, but just, I'm sure people are curious that in your experience, I can imagine things are missed quite a lot. You were saying about things being more identifiable, but just things about like your body changing, your body's going through so many changes anyway, knowing whether that's like a normal pregnancy change or whether it's something else going on.
I think you're right. And we were talking about this yesterday. Actually, we were recording a podcast with a GP and looking at like, what does that look like? Was it when you are first presented to by somebody? And I suppose there's two different kind of approaches, I think, to this to a degree, what you've just said. So one is the newly pregnant person for the first time, everything is going to feel new, it's going to feel different, sort of body changes, taste, sensation, sensory changes are all going to be very, very new. So how does that person identify normal and not normal? Well, the answer is it's going to be difficult. But what we're talking about at its core is about when there's a repeat presentation with the same issue. And this is more about if something is concerning, if it's sore, if it's if you are, we're in an age where we have so many body different messages out there, but actually we don't contextualize them in pregnancy often enough, and that's part of the issue around actually maintain those regular checks when you're pregnant. Maintain your regular breast checks. If you're in a two-parent family, there's a responsibility of both parties. Having partners have as equally responsibility to highlight changes and issues that people might experience. I think from an intimacy perspective, maybe shy away from the conversation, but actually, it's a conversation we need to have, because who's better to notice a change in our body sometimes than our partner? Yeah. So we were touching each other. But when that person gets to the point where they think, actually, no, this has been at me for a couple of weeks, I'm not sure what this is, they present. Hopefully there'll be a proactive response to that. Thinking, okay, if you weren't pregnant, how would I assess you within that symptom? Would it concern me, or would I be happy to say, okay, if that continues, I want it to come back in a couple of weeks, because if it hasn't gone away, I want to make a referral over it. So it's having a proactive approach to start, and I think it's how we assess from a medical question. Again, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but what are your normal cancer red flags? And then if somebody presents to you in pregnancy with these symptoms, do you assess them as a pregnant person, or do you assess them as the symptom? And then you look at pregnancy associated as well, rather than seeing everything through. Oh, well, your headaches. Oh, it just is dehydration. Oh, you're struggling with hemorrhoids. Oh, well, you're pregnant. You've got rectal bleeding. It must be because of this. You've got abdominal discomfort. Oh, it must be because of pregnant. It's actually no. Where is the abdominal discomfort? Where is it sensory? Is it radiating somewhere else? Breast symptoms, there are numerous. And And I think over the years, the narrative has shifted away from this kind of pea-sized lump conversation, and it's more now there are various symptoms of breast cancer, from skin skin pigmentation changes. That's not related to breast cancer. That can be particularly for things like melanoma, skin cancer symptoms as well. But discharges from the nipple, changes, dimpling in the breast tissue, lumpiness, masses or small masses, sore and achiness. All of these things actually presenting. It's just like, if in doubt, go get checked. Give somebody the opportunity to assess you. But the flip side of that is, if you have already been through pregnancy before, successful pregnancy or, a lost pregnancy, you will have an idea of what feels normal for you. And so we need to be cautious that we don't presume that people will automatically present as soon as they feel something different. Because some people can be a little bit more blasé. If you, I'm going to really generalize here, but if you've had a baby girl first pregnancy, and then you're pregnant with a baby boy the second pregnancy, people talk, don't they, about, this feels different. It's totally. It's more of a frontal bump rather than very, very sort of flat, and I feel wider this time. So physically, those things are potentially going to feel different in small places. And people can just put those down to, this screws up on the boy this time. What we're talking about is, again, those acute symptoms that they don't go away, that they start to worry you. We'll need to try and keep anxiety very low during pregnancy. So if you feel dismissed constantly during pregnancy, it's going to heighten your anxiety throughout. And actually say, do you know what? I know my body. Be your own advocate. Say, look, I know my body during pregnancy. This does not feel right for me. This has been here now 2 or 3 weeks. It's not going away. You may get a virtual, an appointment initially, and then again, in terms of your application for yourself, symptoms to push for a physical appointment, so you can actually have that symptom looked at. And your hope then would be that would a starting process then to a referral either to urgent clinic breast checks, or gastro clinic, or hematology, or gynecology, wherever it is to make sure those symptoms get escalated as quickly as possible. Yes, fingers crossed, we're trying to rule out cancer, and in the majority of cases, thankfully, those symptoms won't be cancer-related. But it's about starting the pathway as early as possible, so that if sadly it does end up with cancer diagnosis, we're giving people the widest possible options and choices around treatment, around surgery, and any further intervention. And it's trying to break down the myths out there that actually, you can't be investigated for cancer during pregnancy. Something you can. You can have biopsies, you can have staging scans, but there's this kind of idea that, no, you can't.
That's definitely the narrative.
Yeah,
that I've heard out there as well.
But when you speak to enough oncologists, enough surgeons, you realise how frustrated they get at that narrative. Thinking, why are you telling me you can't state it? You can't.
Yeah.
And it's the threshold at which those scans can and cannot be done as well, rather than saying, carte blanche, they are pregnant, therefore we can't scan them. So, well, actually, she's 18 weeks pregnant at the moment. We can adequately shield at this stage, be able to scan. Whereas if they were 34 weeks pregnant, you'd be saying, you know what, we're probably going to have to be able to accurately do this, we're going to have to wait until, she's postnatal. But at that point, you're probably only waiting 2 or 3 more weeks anyway, in which case you're going to be able to do it quickly, as opposed to going, well, let's wait 20 weeks before we scan.
Exactly. That's a completely different story.
That's enough of a time frame for somebody to go from curative to having metastatic disease. And then you're dealing with an entirely different situation.
I think that's really, really helpful. And I just remember after our first conversation just being like, wow, this just didn't even enter my head that this actually happened, which is so mad, because obviously I know people get pregnant and I know people get diagnosed with cancer. So the chances are there's going to be an overlap. So I think even just having an awareness of, if you're worried about something, not always putting it down to, it's just because I'm pregnant. And I think on a less serious level, it can also happen postnatally. Symptoms can,
we see the same kind of narratives that unfold.
Yeah.
We see it particularly with breast changes again. People associated with things to do with feeding or struggling to get a supply through blocked milk duct, mastitis. You see it with gynae issues, sometimes with postpartum bleeds that extend way beyond what you would consider safe levels of guidance, but not being investigated necessarily, or either health professionals or individuals putting them down. So this is just because I'm postnatal.
Definitely.
It's like, well, how long is safe and how long is, actually this needs investigating? And not necessarily because of cancer risk, but especially when it comes to bleeds. not because of a cancer risk, but there's actually numerous other issues that get a sign up, and also potentially more pressing, like things like sepsis, for example. So.
And I think a lot of it is put down to, like you said, like, this is normal because I'm pregnant. This is normal because I'm postpartum. And actually it's about, like you said, having a voice and being like, does this feel right? And advocating for yourself. I think that was really helpful.
Absolutely. And also knowing as a health professional on the other side of it, to not be offended if somebody says, okay, but can I have a second opinion?
Yeah.
If you as a health professional are really assured that what you're suggesting is right, then actually I'd almost welcome somebody to say,
don't mind.
Lovely to go and get the reassurance that what I'm telling you is correct. Whereas a second opinion might assess the same issue, just go, no, I'm not happy about that. I'd like to get that referred through because that looks more angry than it should do. I'm talking about an example I was sharing with some students the other day was about a mole that a community nurse spotted on somebody's back during an antenatal appointment. And it was angry and discoloured, and it was looking quite pussy and angry. And it was enough to prompt that nurse to say, no, you need to get an appointment made with the GP today to get that referred through because I'm not happy about how that looks. So it's about being proactive, even if the person isn't presenting to you.
Yeah.
If you spot something during a routine appointment and say, how long was that? Felt like that. Because, we were using the example the other day about a midwife maybe doing a bump measurement. And, she touches a part of the woman's abdomen and the mum flinches and she's in quite a lot, discomfort. And that was not something I would normally associate somebody with being very, very sore at that particular point throughout this gestation. Or is there something painful up there? Have you bruised? Have you banged or something? And I go, I don't remember doing so. Okay, right. So it's not external bruising. So that suggests there's something, that needs investigating there for what's causing it.
I think that that really resonates with me as well at this point, that when you go and, we're kind of both on this, I'm really excited about starting this research project and seeing where we get to with the midwives' perception and ideas around physical activity. But it's about seeing it more holistically, isn't it? Like someone coming in for a check, a midwife, 28-week check or whatever, often, and it's the pressure of the system and time and everything. It's like, I'm working through this checklist and this is what I've got to get through. And it's actually just opening that up to this person, just because they're pregnant, it might not be the only thing that's going on. And it's mental health is a huge one as well. Just saying to a mum at their 6-week check, like, so how are you feeling? You okay? The GP, that's the way of checking in. And it's like, I don't know whether I'm okay. I'm not sleeping. I'm not,
It's what does okay look like for one person and another. And
exactly.
I think it's about creating as wide a range of what you're, going back to the phrase normal, like if you are, say for instance, let's use the running example because we both talked about that in the past. If you regularly run 10K run 3 or 4 times a week, your normal benchmark is to be running about 30K a week. Okay, so if you are then pregnant, if you don't have adequate advice and support around safety threshold, then you might immediately shut down and go, oh right, well now that I'm pregnant, I must do that. Because people associate, well, if I'm physically moving around, that's going to heighten my risk of miscarriage. And they might say, actually, run whatever feels comfortable. And once it starts to feel uncomfortable, that's the point to lower your threshold, lower your distances per week. And again, like my example of my friend, like my late friend Ben, you get extremes within the running world. You have on one hand, you have the likes of Jasmine Harris, who's out there doing ultramarathons and all sorts when she was about 34, 35 weeks pregnant, doing fell runs up in the UK.
Yeah.
And then you see her then complete the spine race, which is arguably one of the most brutal races you'll ever see anywhere in the world. And she's there expressing milk, breastfeeding at various checkpoints throughout a 260 plus mile race. That is not going to be the norm for you, for me, for your average person on the street. But what it does show is, it re-emphasizes how bloody extraordinary the female body is, the level of endurance it has, that I think the male body could only dream of being able to do what the female body does anyway. But I think what it does is it widens the net to say, actually, do you know what? That might not be my level, but it doesn't mean that I can't still run 20K a week just because I'm pregnant. So why would one thing prevent the other? And you could, I think when we talk about risk, about exercise, I think it's really important. Do you know what? There are people who do not exercise at all, and something may happen within the pregnancy, tragically, and they lose that pregnancy. And equally, somebody could be running every week, every day, and go full term and, have a really wonderful birth. And I think we need to stop associating movement with risk and actually say, do you know
absolutely.
what? Better cardiovascular activity is going to benefit you, is going to benefit the baby. And I'm talking in lay terms now, not as a clinician. Somebody that I know at the moment, for example, all the way through her pregnancy journey, she has been posting on Instagram every single day her exercise routine that she's doing in her own garage. Loads of kettlebell lifts, loads of swings, loads of movement. But do you know what? That's her. Because from a psychological perspective, if she had not moved for the last 6 months, she would have gone up the wall with frustration and the lack of activity.
I hear her.
You know yourself, and I think it's about saying to that person, do you know what? If you get pregnant, then you do fear, do you know what? I have not got the energy to lift a bag of sugar, never mind a 40 kilogram weight. That's you. And that should not be, but I should be able to. It's not like you should be able to. You go with a personal, what feels good for you. And if you're now going to put your feet up for the first time in years because you want to just enjoy this for what it is, and you don't feel the pressure to suddenly be out there doing all this stuff. And
I think it's about being informed, and I think it's exactly the same with what we've talked about throughout. Is for me, there's still this missing piece of to be able to make an informed decision, you need to have all the facts. And the problem is that I don't think they're necessarily readily available to every pregnant woman. So I think there's still a lot of myths being branded around.
Something as simple as saying to people, just know that if you want to, you can.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it. It doesn't need to be any more than that. You don't have to set a bar. You could just say, if you want to move, move. If you're worried about what types of movement are safe, then we can plug you into somebody who does this, somebody like that, or look for guidance on kind of pregnancy and fitness kind of regimes, pregnancy-based yoga. It's not shutting it down and go, oh, you're pregnant, therefore sit still. And that's it. Or you've got cancer, therefore sit still.
Sit still, exactly. And I think what you've touched on, and we've talked about like strength in pregnancy, is there seems to be this notion of like you get pregnant and suddenly you're like vulnerable, or oh, you're going to like hurt something. And actually we are built, whether we choose to do it or we can do it, everyone's story is different, but we are built to do this. And I think it took until I actually got pregnant myself to be like, this is not me doing, this is my body naturally doing its thing. And yes, like doing Olympic lifts is getting harder at 32 weeks pregnant, but like it shouldn't be now you need to lie on your bed and rest. Like you're saying, we're not vulnerable, we're pregnant. And we can tolerate a lot more than most people think. Like you said, the human body. I know
people who are pregnant and can lift more than I can.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost in the third trimester, and they're still lifting more than I can.
Yeah,
because it's again, thankfully that culture has shifted now, and I think the whole, whether you see it phrases like girls who lift or women who lift, it's something that wasn't there years ago, and now in the gym space, it's like. It's as normal as anybody. It's just, whereas it used to be very much kind of the gym bros, only chucking the big weights around. Was actually, I was
thankfully it's changing.
It is, it's great. And there was somebody else who came in later on. And I was looking at what she'd been posting. I was thinking, wow, we were both lifting the same today.
Yeah.
And that doesn't surprise me at all. But it's just, I love the way that's shifted over the years. The lack of judgment that it seemed to really, I'm not saying it's gone in all areas, but certainly I think within things like CrossFit, not that it's an activity that I do an awful lot of. I do some of those kind of exercises, but it's a really equal kind of gender space now, which is, I think, is nothing but positive. And I think ultimately, if that can start to usher then into the pregnancy realm, I think that even more so, and add into it, cancer diagnosis as well.
Yeah.
It's down to the individual at the end of the day. What works for them, works for them.
And supporting them feeling like we've talked about all the way through, mentally and physically strong. Like that's the most important. That's how you want people to feel in these challenging times.
Yeah, and I think there's another side to this as well. I think just it's probably important to mention is we're talking about pregnancy, we're talking about being postnatal, we're talking about cancer, and what also comes into this area as well is people have been pushed into early menopause, so being perimenopausal as a result of cancer treatments, and how that impacts people's physical ability.
Good point.
And again, actually, a lot of the time when we hear, this you hear some of this, whether it's research led or not, I don't know, but you hear some of it around things like cold walk therapy is really good for offsetting some of the menopause symptoms, things like, the night sweats and things like that. But it's more about how exercise in that space actually can mean, that might be your go-to. That might be the thing that keeps some of your worst symptoms that you experience at bay. But actually, you are told, oh no, you're better just, allowing symptoms to hit, just not resist it. Actually, sometimes there's an inward fight that comes from people to say, you know what, I'm not going to sit still. This is not going to stop me from doing what I want to do.
Yeah, and thankfully that's changing as well.
Massively so. I think the thing that it needs more of, I think the changing menopause conversation again. I've seen so much change in this sector over the last decade.
Definitely.
But the conversation about menopause has obviously changed fundamentally in that period of time. It's still very much set in a 50-plus context, and I think that's the one thing that it needs a little bit more of is to, what if you were, for any reason, whether it's to do with cancer, whether it's to do with other illnesses, what if you were to become menopausal in your 30s, in your early 40s, and, how does that impact your ability to exercise, and, from a post-pregnancy perspective, things like pelvic floor issues, pelvic prolapse, incontinence. How does that impact people's confidence to actually be active, work out, jumping around, all these things? I'm actually saying to people, you know what? Be you, be led by yourself. And there is, thankfully, through people like you and through people like Sarah, who I alluded to earlier, who has Get Me Back, which is like cancer recovery exercises, there's far more out there now than there ever was previously. If you want to know how to exercise safely, pregnancy or not, cancer or not, there used to be very, very little out there, whereas now, thankfully, one benefit of social media is it's much more prominent.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I saw on Instagram the other day, and I was like, oh God, this is going to be me. Just talking about, menopause and people going through it earlier. I'm 41 and I've had lots of conversations with friends, over the last year, and I work with a lot of clients who are in their 40s and they're talking about perimenopause and menopausal symptoms. I think you're right. It's this thing that's like, oh, it happens to us like late in life. It's like, no. This is happening to most women. It's starting like very much mid-life, and women are having children later, generally. It's a generalization. So I saw this post on Instagram that someone, and I was like, this is literally going to be me posting next year, that she's like had a baby at 40 and then now she's straight into perimenopause. So it's like, it's having tools in your toolbox to deal with these huge hormonal shifts that we kind of alluded to at the start of the podcast, that women are going to be going through potentially closer together than, a longer time ago where people maybe chose to have kids earlier and, things happening at different times.
And it's recognizing as well, I mean, again, this is maybe something that is missing from the menopause conversation at the moment as well, is it's shifting the dial to make sure that people see actually, to know what, when somebody is going through perimenopause, goes into menopause, out the other side of it, it is everybody's responsibility for support. And what drives me mad is you still hear in dark corners more so now than you used to, but you still hear the kind of she's going through the change. And it just makes, oh God, sure. And it's like, no, this is your responsibility to support as well. Go and find stuff. Go and read things.
Exactly.
I think what's good now though is there's a few guys on Instagram who are doing it in a jokey way, but they're doing it with a serious note as well.
I think
the guy
so.
does it with okay, guys, I'm going to teach you something. Okay, 5 steps in menopause.
Snacks. I've seen that.
Snacks, they're not yours anymore. Do not eat the snacks, or you will suffer for the rest of the week. And as much as it is done with a humorous kind of content, I think if that's the way it lands with more partners to go, oh, actually, you know what? I really need to step up to the plate. I need to understand this better, and I understand. Why are we not? Why do moods seem to fluctuate more than they used to before? Why do little things now seem to cause a row when they never used to? Why are these innocuous things creeping in, or whether it impacts things like intimacy, which postnatally incidents, loads of issues that are physical issues as well as psychological issues that are brought around that. But it's like, take the time to actually look up this stuff yourself. Don't just leave it to your partner to be working out why she is feeling the way she is. Go and look it up yourself as well. And there are so many, I mean, don't be wrong, there's to a point of saturation now where you get things like the Live app will pop up every 2 minutes. And it's scary how it's almost like you have been having a conversation, with the person that you love. The next thing, and that pops up on even. I think I don't need that. We're having a conversation, but you're getting all these tools thrown at you. But I just want to briefly go back to something you mentioned. You've said this a couple of times. Then there is the link between having baby or first baby later in life, and we do see World Health Organization reiterate this, that the average age for first babies now has just shifted much more into the late 30s, sometimes even early 40s. And unfortunately, with that, for certain types of cancers, you will step in inadvertently by coincidence. You will step into slightly higher risk brackets due to age. Certain cancers, and obviously with breast cancer, the risk starts to elevate once you get into kind of sort of early to mid 40s. So that is also going to see a higher level of diagnosis happening.
Definitely.
It's important that we clarify that is not because of causation, again, like I said earlier on. It's just because by virtue of being 42, you're at higher risk, or 44, you're at higher risk. It's not because you've suddenly got pregnant.
Yeah. So the pregnancy isn't the cause of it. It's just the kind of social change of the age.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're seeing. We will see a steady increase in people being diagnosed. But again, I think we should be cautious that we don't get too panicked about hearing the words diagnosis and rates going up. Because at the end of the day, yes, we don't want people to get cancer. But if they are being diagnosed in itself and they're in a diagnosis at a point where they're curative, surely that should be a good thing because we're getting intervention earlier. Whereas sometimes we hear the words diagnosis and it's not framed with, and at the point of diagnosis, how many of those people were terminally ill? And actually, that's the bit we should be worried about is, well, why weren't they investigated earlier? Did they present? Obviously, we can't do anything about somebody that does not present with symptoms. And I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody about this, where they were saying, they felt symptoms all the way through the pregnancy, but they just never asked anybody about it. And by the time they presented, they were already terminally ill. It was already stage 4. And you were saying, you know what? There's a little bit that we could have done better in terms of actually saying to people about body vigilance messages. If in doubt, probably get checked. And that person may have picked up on those messages and gone, I'm going to get checked. But equally, the health professional from their side, you can't do anything about something that you don't know about. And so it's about everybody having an equal responsibility around encouraging body vigilance, reminding people what the standard checks are that they should be doing, postnatally reminding people and asking the question, and from a midwifery perspective, certainly, were you due to smear during pregnancy? If not, if you were, can I make the appointment for you today so they doesn't slip off the agenda? Because as new parents, as the birthing parent, we are busy. We've got loads of appointments coming out, right? We've got inoculations, we've got red book appointments, we've got postnatal checks, a weigh-in clinic. The smear can drop down that list quite rapidly. So it's about
totally.
Having that planned out and say, right, you know what? If in doubt, get it booked in. And then you've just got the appointment to turn up to, not making the appointment yourself, which is what often gets missed. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good place to. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to end, but to share a couple of things. But I think that's thinking about being proactive and not missing, because we're as a population choosing to have children later, like you said, it's not causing the cancer, but it means that your work at Mummy's Star and is going to be even more valuable because there's going to be women, and sometimes women might need help presenting. Like that just really resonates with me that you said it might be that, just asking a follow-up question or digging a little bit deeper is what people need to be doing. It's not always something else on the tick list, is it? Often it's just opening up the conversation a bit more or noticing something. And I think that's really, really important.
And that's what I would love to see. If I would love to just see cancer awareness messages and their symptoms. I would just like to see more of those messages in a pregnancy context.
Definitely.
Do you know what? And if these happen during pregnancy, go and get checked too.
Yeah, I think it's almost more needed because of the things that we've talked about. We all know as women, particularly with breast cancer, awareness, we all know the checks we need to be doing, what we need to be doing. I think you're right. Having that in the context of pregnancy, I bet there are loads of women that are really good at checking themselves and doing that regularly. They get pregnant, they don't do it anymore. I bet there are, because
I made the same assumption, and I talk about that quite regularly with people, is to say we can have all these. If you might have, I think it's the Copper Feel app that has Feel Up first, and you can have that reminder, and then you become pregnant, and do you still remember to check yourself, as regularly.
Exactly.
It's simple things like that. And I don't think it needs to be some big groundbreaking message. I think it's actually just slightly reframing what we already have out there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Right, to end, I'm putting you on the spot, but I think you've always got things to share. So do you have any resources or people to follow? Obviously I'm going to link Mummy Star in the notes, but is there anyone that kind of has inspired you, or someone working in the cancer space or pregnancy space that you find particularly inspiring that we might want to share with the listeners?
I think probably one of the best sources of information, I think, at how changeable, how wide it paints cancer, I think, as an experience. I think it's not one person, it's two. It's Naman and Joe that run that chat podcast. It's been going a few years now. I think 4 years. Just at their
4 years.
But I think the range of subjects, like, I think when that started, it could all too easily have been, we're going to talk about, this is my job, and it was quite dry. And actually, it's become much more about the human aspects of breaking down what those roles individually are, including their own roles. As what does a therapeutic radiographer do? Well, they sit and they scan, and that's it. It's actually no. It's so much more than this. It's so much more human. But they've gone into so many different aspects of cancer care, from the professional side, from the patient side, from the historically more peripheral aspects of cancer care. Like we were talking about menopause, towards the end of this. For a long time, menopause conversations didn't really exist as commonplace through the cancer world. It became that also might happen. It's like, no, it's actually a really key component of our stuff now. Conversations are talking about things like, what does it look like, feel like to walk into a room where you're going to have an MRI for the first time? Because actually, to the untrained eye, that could really set people off in terms of their anxiety. Go sky high. And they've just managed to demystify so many different aspects of the cancer world that a lot of us, and health professionals included, just didn't have an awareness of. They didn't understand each other's roles the way they can gain that insight now through everything that Joe and Nam have done and explored. And I've been fortunate to be on the podcast a few years ago talking about our work, and it's just a great way of getting an insight into other aspects.
And it's really varied, isn't it?
Yeah, really, really good. How to, I think the importance of, one of the ones that always sticks out to me is one that they did with Stuart Callahan from Outpatients, and it was simply about like how to make a person feel more validated, feel seen, by simply using terminology that is reflective of that person's identity. And these things get missed and so flippantly, referred to as, whatever you go by. And actually, you know what? It takes 2 minutes to read somebody's notes and actually address that person by how they identify, who they are, and take an acknowledgement of every individual person has a different lifestyle, has a different approach, has a different level of activity, like we're talking about, and tailoring it. I know appointments are time tight, like you alluded to earlier on, but actually it takes 2 seconds to just make things a little bit more personal. And I think it's that, to me, has really helped broaden my knowledge. Probably more than that. I don't be wrong, I've met some amazing individuals over the last 12 years that I never thought I'd ever at least understand their roles. But that, for me, has been a real broadening of my own education over the last few years. And there's so many episodes, it's hard to actually listen to every single one of them. But it's a brilliant source of information for anybody, whether you've got cancer and you're worried about something that is about to unfold. There will be an episode in there that digs into that in some way. Pretty much guarantee it. And if not, message them and ask them and say, what about this?
Yeah, they'll be able to help you. Thank you so much. Amazing. Naman will be very happy that we've shared that. And any practical, we talked about like kind of tips and stuff, but any practical tips or advice for anyone who might be going through something like this at this time, or supporting someone going through this at this time?
I always go back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier on. Is see the person for the person that you've always known, and talk to them as the person they've always known. Not every conversation is helpful to be about cancer. It's talk to them about the fact that, joke aside, but talk about the fact that why your partner is driving you up the bloody wall at the moment, or why the kids are driving you mad, or talk about that that activity that you guys are planning, or that holiday that you're looking forward to. Don't frame everything by
give them a break
but
from
that might be possible now because you've been diagnosed with cancer, and just be led by the individual. I think to the person who's been diagnosed, don't be afraid to accept help, because you would happily offer out money when they're diagnosed. Don't be afraid to accept it yourself and write down the things that are going to help you the most, so that when somebody does come off the support,
that's really
you've
good
got a
advice.
ready-made list of stuff, something, and you're not having to. People can get really awkward sometimes when they offer support.
Like,
if anything I can do to help, just let me know. And then neither you nor the person you're offering the help to actually knows what that meant. Whereas if you've got a ready-made list of things that you actually need support with, you can kind of give them a little list and say, is there anything there you can do? And it makes everybody go, I've got something now I know I can actually take away of helping. And sometimes WhatsApp groups really help with that. As much as WhatsApp groups can do my head in. And you go for a meeting, you turn it back on, you've got 154 messages. For things like cancer support, it's getting your tribe together, getting your community and saying, do you know what, guys, this is where I'm at. I'm at chemo next Tuesday. Is anybody around to give me a lift over?
Yeah.
Can anybody sit with me through chemo for the day? Because actually, I don't want to talk to all people on there because they're way older than me. And actually, I'm not in their demographic. As much as they're lovely, I want to be with somebody who's
I want one of my people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not a bad reflection of other people. It's just, you just want to be you at the end of the day. I don't, in the same way that I could translate that to, when Maya died, I never felt that I was the widowed dad of two. I was the parent to Martha and Murray. I also sadly had lost my wife. But I never used to like being referred to or framed as, single dad because of cancer.
Yeah.
I was always Pete the dad long before cancer ever came into our lives and tragically took it from us. So,
it's not defining you. I think those are really amazing tips. And if I can say this, I think they're also amazing tips that can be applied even to someone who's not had a cancer diagnosis. I'm just thinking about that list of things. We're notoriously bad as parents at being martyrs and saying how hard things are, but then not accepting any help. And I actually think for some people, whether you're a single parent or, you've got a support network around you, when someone asks if you want any help, they mean it. So that list, I'm like, I'm going to be making that list. As in, then you don't have to think of things, which is also stressful. Like, oh God, now I'm not telling them anything. And I think that's a really great piece of advice.
It gives you an opportunity as well to filter out the things that are precious to you that you actually want to have control over.
Exactly.
Those things that you go, do you know what? Anybody can do that.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really true. Yeah, exactly. It soon make you see what you actually want to do and not want to do, what you're happy to relinquish control on. And lastly, where can we find you? I'm going to link Mummy Star.
So you've got Mummy Star can be found on any social media. So LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and on X. And our website as well is www.mummystar.org, where you find all the resources in terms of what we offer as a charity on a day-to-day basis and what that support looks like in more detail in terms of families, but also health professionals. And what you'll also find within our website as well is a series of Ask the Expert sessions, which again are delving into some of the less often seen aspects of cancer. Care and support, but actually dig into some of those topics. There are things that have been really conversations led by our families. They've said these are things that are bothering us, and then we've ended up creating this library of resources, and it talks about everything from the day-to-day rigor of cancer treatments and side effects to how do you plan if the end is going to come, and talk to children about cancer. All our aspects in there.
Amazing.
So so that's
thank you so much.
If you end up following me on Instagram, you'll just probably see pictures of me jumping in cold reservoirs.
I really enjoy it. I see workouts and cold dipping, which I'm all over. So I really enjoy all of that. It's great. Thank you so much, Pete. Thank you for being so generous, just sharing your story. I think it's always amazing. It always blows my mind. Seeing what people can do in life, like from a tragedy or losing someone. I'm sure you come across so many people like this all the time.
Yeah,
you
definitely.
are one of them. And I think like doing these incredible things for so many people. I think it's amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to us digging into this a bit more and unmasking the fitness, cancer and pregnancy world.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Thank you so much, Pete.
It's a pleasure. No, thank you.
Take care.
And I will see you soon see what's going on with our research.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for listening, my Pregnant and Strong team, to another episode. It's fantastic to have you here. I'd love you to subscribe and share. It's going to help us spread the message far and wide, and also just share with anyone you know that might be on this journey, because I know there's not so much out there about these kind of topics that we're talking about on this podcast. So I'd really love you to share an episode or the link with someone you know, a friend or family member, and I'm really hoping it brings you some help, support, comfort at this stage. And please do comment, get in touch on Instagram. All the details are in the show notes, and I'll see you next week.